We're joined today by Freda Payne. You might remember her from her classic in the 1970s, Band of Gold. And right now she's got a new single out. It's called Do You Still Dream About Me? Hey, Freda, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, first of all, you have a new single out. Do You Still Dream About Me? Can you tell the listeners a bit about the new song?
Well, it's a new song that I just put out a couple of months ago, but it's not exactly new. It was actually originally written for me by a guy by the name of Sammy McKinney, who is no longer with us. He's gone on, made his transition several years ago. He was a songwriter, and he did write a couple of hits for Anita Baker. He wrote songs, did some stuff with the Pointer Sisters, Patti LaBelle. But anyway, I recorded the song back in 2003 and it was produced by Preston Glass, but nothing ever happened with it. It wasn't on it was on an album, and we weren't able to do anything with that particular album the way we wanted to do it. Also, the song had been originally meant for me to record in the first place, but back in the 80s when it was written, now that's how far back this song goes. Back in the 80s, I was supposed to get a deal with Columbia, their jazz label with Columbia, and what happened was they went with Nancy Wilson instead. So you can see, Nancy, of course, had the power and had more influence, and of course was much more popular and famous than I was at the time. And so she recorded it, and it came out on Columbia's label. So I always had a strong feeling. I always had a connection to this song. I don't know if it was a spiritual or the lyrics themselves will say it all. Sometimes the lyrics in a song will say it all, why you love it so much. And I decided I wanted to do it again. And I've been working with Michael Sutton, a producer and arranger, and he says, yeah, let's do it. So he did a track, he did his own version, which was a little slightly different, a little slower, a little bit more sensuous. And we just went in and recorded it again. That's my story. It's a long one now. It's not a short one.
Excellent. Yeah, the song is great. And you mentioned working with Michael Sutton. I recognized his name right away from Motown. You definitely you get that Detroit sound having worked with him. Yeah.
Well, he's a former Motown guy. He came out of that camp, and so I knew I couldn't go wrong with him.
You have been singing since you were a kid, and I read you actually sang with Duke Ellington early on, and I know you worked with Quincy Jones. I mean, that's amazing to have those kind of guys right out of the gate.
Well, I was 17 when I first sang with Duke, and it was more like a guest artist. I never was hired, although he wanted me to be his band singer, and he sent me a contract to sign that was for 10 years, and I'm 17. So it never worked out, because after my mother's lawyer read it and my mother read it, and he didn't want to change anything, as far as the length of the contract and the amount of money I'd be making and all that kind of stuff. He didn't want to alter anything, so that never came to pass. However, I did work with Quincy Jones and his big band, and I worked with him on 2 different occasions. It was back in the 60s, and it was at the Apollo Theater, and it was his big band, and he had Billy Eckstine headlining, because Billy Eckstine was he was the male superstar of that time, of that era. And we had Red Fox he was the comedian, and I'm sure people still remember Red Fox.
Of course.
And he had Honey Coles and Charlie Atkins as a dance team. They were tap dancers, sort of like Harold and Fayard Nicholas, the Nicholas brothers. And so that's what happened. It was like one of those kind of things. And then I worked, and I was a jazz singer, but at the same time, I kind of like, it was like fluctuating. Well, with Duke, that's all jazz. You're doing Duke Ellington, right? With Quincy, we did a little bit, like we did a song called One Mint Julep, which was kind of like but it was R&B, but it was put to an 18-piece jazz orchestration. And, I did, like Secret Love, Teach Me Tonight. And then once he wanted me to do, he says, I want you to do this latest Supremes hit, and at first I didn't want to do it because I said, this is pop R&B, He said, oh, no, the audience will love it. It was Where Did Our Love Go? And I was like skeptical, but then when I saw the reaction with the audience, I said, oh, I know, I get it. Yeah.
So is that kind of what made you maybe move more out of the jazz style into the R&B? Was it basically...
in a way, because when it got to be like in the late 60s, around 68, 69, that's when I decided I wanted to go more R&B, because I saw that the best way to become recognized and to accelerate in your career is to have a hit record. And I was right. To have a hit record changes everything. What you can command, as far as engagements are concerned, your popularity. And that's what I did, because I'm really a jazz singer. I started out singing jazz. My first album was on Impulse, which is a jazz label. And that was back in the 60s. And my first album was jazz. Not pop, not R&B, but jazz.
And I know when you made the switch, and you really made your mark when Band of Gold was released, not just the song itself, but that whole album, really a classic. I just listened to it again, and it's amazing that you were able to make the switch, and you made it so seamlessly, and still a lot of people, even today, influenced by that album.
Oh, yeah. When I think back on that one, because that was the one that, I was kind of like, wow, this is jumping into really going all the way into pop R&B. I'm not just like middle of the road. This is all the way in. And I haven't looked, I don't regret it at all. Although I have to tell you, it's given me a hard time to be respected as a pure jazz singer, because people always have this thing, oh yeah, Freda Payne, Band of Gold, and they don't think of me as a jazz singer. But people, when they hear me perform and I'm doing my jazz, like Ella Fitzgerald or something like that, they're shocked and they say, God, I know you for Band of Gold, but my God, you really sing jazz a whole lot. Really good, really well. And of course I say, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, Freda, I know you pretty much had a new album out every year. I think in the 70s, the music industry definitely a lot different back then. Just the pace you kept up was incredible.
Well, back then, we're talking, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s even. When you had a label behind you, when you signed a contract, normally they wanted an album per year. Like if it was 3 years, you got 3 albums. If it was 5 years, maybe 3, maybe 4. That's how they roll. So, but now where a lot of artists can't even get on a label. And I'm talking about veteran artists who've done it and had hit records.
Sure.
More than me. And what you do is you start doing stuff independently on your own. So you put out your own label, or you just put it out, period. And you pay for your own musicians. You pay for your own promotion. See, it used to be the record company did all of that. They paid for all of that. So now artists today, you have to everything has to be independent, like solo.
Well, I know eventually you made your way into acting. Was that always something you wanted to do, or how did that come about? Right around 1980, you kind of went all in on the acting.
Well, I kind of like started with the acting actually back in the 60s. When you say all in, it was really back in the 60s. And I started my first movie, but it was only like a little, what I call a cameo. I only had, believe it or not, you're going to laugh, one line in a movie with Jerry Lewis, and it was called The Disorderly Orderly, and that was 1964. And then after that, I was on Broadway. I was living in New York, and this was in 1967. And I went and got the job. I was hired to be Leslie Uggam's understudy in Hallelujah Baby, wow, which was a hit show. And once I was hired, and after 3 weeks, they asked me to go on. They wanted me to go on. I went on, and I got a standing ovation at the end of the show when the curtain went down. I went on again 5 more times as the lead actor, singer, actress in a Broadway musical. And I was on that stage from the moment the curtain came up until the moment the curtain went down. So I did one thing that I knew I did well. So, and that was in 1967 into 68. And then after that, let's see what else I've done. I've done other stuff. I've done in the 70s. I did Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies. That was another musical that came from Broadway. And I did about 6 different companies over a span of 20-something years of Sophisticated Ladies. I also did the touring company of Jelly's Last Jam. That was started out starring on Broadway with Gregory Hines, Savion Glover, Keith David, and I was in the first production of it that opened here at the Mark Taper. That was in 1991, before it went to Broadway. That was with Oba Babatunde playing Jelly, Ro Morton, Keith David, the wonderful Keith David, Savion Glover, who is probably the best professional tap dancer on the planet, and myself. So there you go. And I've done another musical. It's called The Blues in the Night. That's Sheldon Epps, who directed and conceived it. I've done several companies all over, here in LA, in Seattle, Washington, in Japan, here in Pasadena as well, Pasadena Playhouse. So I've done I've done some other movies, Cordially Invited. I did The Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy, the Klumps, the Nutty Professor, the Klumps with Eddie Murphy.
Sure.
I did that. And that was like a cameo role. So that's about it. I've done other things,
Yeah, definitely an incredible career you've had. And I know you just released a book not too long ago, Band of Gold, a memoir, and you definitely have been keeping busy. I imagine all those stories are in the book as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as the years went by, I had to, talking about my memoir, I had to have that in because those weren't minor things. Those were major things in my life that I did. Yeah, Band of Gold, a memoir. It's written by me and Mark Bigo.
Okay. I've had him on the show before, too, I believe. I think he did a couple other books.
He's done more than a couple. He's done about 50-something, 60 books.
I believe
that's what he says.
Yeah, I think he worked with Mary Wilson. I believe I had him on. When
yes,
he did
he worked a lot with Mary. They were best of friends. Mary did the foreword in my book.
Okay.
She did the foreword, and this was just 2 months before she passed away. Of course, we were all in shock because that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And
sure,
I knew that Mary had a bad heart. But I knew that also she was taking care of herself, keeping her doctor's appointments, doing her due diligence. But then of course it hit everybody with, like a bat out of hell, when that happened.
Sure.
But she actually wrote that forward for my book 2 months before she passed away.
Well, again, Freda, I know the song is out. Do you still dream about me? Is there anything else maybe you're working on or something else we should be watching out for?
Well, I got something coming out but this is not my project. This is, the actor Jeff Goldblum,
Sure, sure.
Jurassic Park, and all this others, many, many, many things. He's got a long list on his resume. But anyway, he's got an album that's coming out March the 24th of this year, and it's with his band, and I'm doing a song on it, Lazy Afternoon.
Okay. Excellent.
Yes, I got that. And what else? I'll be doing the Catalina Bar and Grill here in town in LA, and that won't be until April the 22nd. Then the next day, the 23rd of April, I'll be doing performing with my niece, who has her own vocal studio in Studio City here, and she's putting on an extravaganza. She'll be featuring her vocal students and my sister Sherry, that's her mother, Sherry Payne. The Supremes, former ladies of the Supremes, will be performing, and also they're going to be honoring the Supremes. So, and I'm going to participate in that. So I guess I'll have to be a Supreme for a day.
Excellent.
That's gonna be at the American Jewish Center. It's here in Bel Air, right off the 405, American Jewish University.
Wonderful. Again, Freda, thank you so much for joining me today. The new song is great, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time. It's been great speaking with you today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
And again, that was the one and only Freda Payne. Her new single, Do You Still Dream About Me, is out now, and also her new book, Band of Gold, a Memoir, available as well.